Welcome to the first episode of a three-part series titled Working with New Americans, From Recruiting to Upskilling. My name is Anthony Sherwinski. I have supported new Americans with their integration journeys for over 10 years. Most of that time has been dedicated to supporting new Americans, community-based organizations, and employers with developing and implementing workforce integration strategies. I have worked with new Americans from over 40 countries and have supported countless community-based organizations and employers from recruiting to upskilling new American team members. I have a master's degree in global community engagement, a bachelor's degree in political science, and am a certified cultural intelligence facilitator. My years of experience have taught me amazing lessons, and I continue to learn from different cultural perspectives every day. From the employer perspective, I have worked with small businesses to large companies. I have worked with C-suite executives, DEI leaders, human resource professionals, and new Americans. My goal in this series is to provide background, education, and quick action steps that your company can take to strengthen your initiatives to hire and retain new Americans and promote general diversity, equity, and inclusivity efforts in your company. The Office of New Americans was created through House Bill 21-1150 in June of 2021. ONA is housed in the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, or CDLE, and as you will see from our vision and mission, ONA's charge and authority spans beyond CDLE. ONA's vision is that all new Americans have equitable access to opportunity and well-being. ONA's mission is to facilitate the integration and inclusion of new Americans into Colorado's civic, economic, and social life. During the introduction, we will review a few definitions to build an understanding of new Americans. We will then engage with the danger of bias and review tools that can be used to help limit bias. Next, I will discuss a few data points on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, and other data points that reveal the important role new Americans play in the workforce. Finally, we will review simple strategies to help target outreach to new Americans. First, let's review some common terms. The definition seen here was established in Colorado legislature in House Bill 21-1150, and that definition is: new Americans are Coloradans who have arrived and a person who will arrive to Colorado as an immigrant or refugee and includes their children. It is important to note that the end of this definition states, "and their children." I highlight this point to recognize that integration does not exist in a finite timeline. Some individuals may be able to integrate into their community relatively quickly and can be doing well economically and socially within a few months, while for others, it can take years and generations. We have identified that the term New Americans is inclusive of a wide range of individuals. Now, let's review a few commonly heard words used to describe certain new Americans. Refugee. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their home because of war, violence, or persecution, often without warning. Asylum seeker. An asylum seeker is someone who is also seeking international protection from dangers in their home country, but whose claim for status has not yet been determined legally. Migrant. A migrant is someone who typically is moving from place to place within their home country or across borders, usually for economic reasons. While there are different legal definitions and various visa statuses that could apply to a new American, it needs to be recognized that many, regardless of status, are often forced into migration. The reasons can range from economic to different forms of persecution or to reunite with family. These data points are sourced from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey and analysis by the American Immigration Council. As of 2021, there are an estimated 570,273 new American residents that live in Colorado. 81% of Colorado's foreign-born population are of working age, which outpaces the percentage of U.S.-born Coloradans that are of working age. The spending power from foreign-born-led households in Colorado is an estimated $15.9 billion. Nearly 30% of foreign-born Coloradans have an advanced degree. and 21% of Colorado immigrants aged 25 and older with at least bachelor's degrees report being underemployed. New Americans are an essential thread in Colorado's economy, and specifically, the last 2 data points reveal that new Americans provide a potentially untapped employment pool of individuals with advanced degrees. While knowledge is a good thing, it can also lead to the development of bias. A bias is something that is extremely difficult to escape. Each of us likely have biases operating in our minds and decision-making almost every day. For example, there have been many times when I assumed that a person's previous professional credentials would likely not transfer to the U.S., or that it is not worth the time to collect documents, identify the reviewing body, pay the fees, and submit to then await lengthy credential review processes. This is a bias that I have developed after gaining experience and knowledge. However, this is a dangerous bias that could affect someone's professional path in the U.S. While knowledge is important, it is far more important that we do not allow knowledge to create bias. A bias to avoid is if an applicant has an accent or has a unique name, we should not immediately assume that they are an asylum seeker or migrant that does not have workforce authorization. Instead of seeing a new American as someone that potentially does not have workforce authorization, see a person as someone who is looking for a job to advance themselves and support their families. There are hiring steps in place that, if followed, will determine workforce authorization. There are 2 questions I regularly hear from employers. The first, can I hire them? If a person does not have work authorization, the employer cannot hire them. However, broadly speaking, most new Americans do have work authorization and can be hired. I then suggest the employer ask themselves a few questions. First, does the job description truly match the needs of the role? For example, when listing on the job description, English required, be sure to identify what this means for the role and then intentionally list it in the job description. Second, are education requirements essential or a potential barrier? For example, employers often list the statement, high school diploma or GED required. I challenge the employer to answer the question, how does knowing this information impact the skills required for the role? Depending on the job, I recommend removing this altogether or to consider allowing years of experience to waive this requirement. Third, do you need a trustworthy employee that has skills and is trainable? Or are the requirements listed on the job description limiting your interview team and your pool of potential applicants? The second most commonly asked question I hear from employers is, how do I know if I can hire a new American? My recommendation is simple. Use the I-9 Employment Eligibility Verification Form as your guide. If followed, it should answer any question or concern that arises. This naturally leads to a short review of workforce authorization. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, and the Department of Justice Immigrant and Employee Rights Section, or DOJ/IER, have produced amazing tools to answer almost any work authorization question. These tools are free and accessible via the USCIS and DOJ/IER websites. For USCIS, I recommend visiting the I-9 Central website. For inquiries, I have also listed their website, a phone number, and an email where you can submit any questions you have. The DOJ/IER also has entire sections on their website that answer legal status and workforce authorization related questions. I have listed their website and a phone number on this slide. Both sites have pages dedicated to frequently asked questions. Each hosts regularly scheduled webinars open to the public and webinars specifically for both employers and employees. Lastly, you do not need to have all legal statuses and eligibility documents and timelines memorized. Use these tools, and while navigating the onboarding of a new American, if you have questions, send an inquiry to either resource for support. For the remainder of this series, I want to clearly state that we will be talking about new Americans who are work authorized. Let's briefly review the benefits of a multicultural workplace and some data points that show the potential impact new Americans could have on any business. Research has found the potential performance benefits of diversity span from 1. Attracting and retaining talent, 2. Enhancing marketing efforts, 3. Having higher creativity and innovation in the workplace, 4. Providing a space for better problem solving, and 5. Having more organizational flexibility. Regarding return on investment, or ROI, the Harvard Business Review found that teams with diversity in management were 35% more likely to have financial returns above their industry mean. Other important new American relevant data points include job retention and the number of the new American population that are of working age. The job retention rate for refugees hovers around 85% nationwide, and 81% of Colorado's foreign-born population is of working age. While data does suggest the value and increased ROI of diverse teams, diversity for the sake of diversity can cause challenges. What we see on this slide are common terms employers should know and use when seeking to nurture diversity in the workplace. Conduct a search using any of these terms: cultural humility, cultural responsiveness, cultural intelligence, or cultural competence, and you will likely find a training that will benefit your teams. A final point to consider is that chief executives, supervisors, and coworkers of new Americans may require different training due to the difference in their professional scopes. A final message I offer to employers is that if you work to create systems that support new Americans, you will have likely prepared an organizational infrastructure to support almost any new hire. You will empower your current team and will have advanced diversity, equity, and inclusivity, or your DEI goals. To highlight this point, there are national efforts and efforts here in Colorado to push the concepts of good jobs and skills-based hiring. Additional information on both of these topics can be found on the Colorado Workforce Development Council's website. We have prepared ourselves with knowledge and have reviewed why hiring new Americans can impact your bottom line. Now, we can discuss best practices in recruiting new American employees. Networks matter. According to a LinkedIn survey, 85% of all jobs are filled via networking. From the two sets of networks seen here, will the person at the center of Group A or B be more likely to find a job that will meet their needs and align with their interests? The obvious answer is correct. The individual at the center of Group B will have a better chance at securing a job they need, simply due to the greater reach of their larger network. What can be drawn from the person in Group A is the increased value each member of their network holds, which suggests the importance of their workplace community. Generally speaking, new Americans will have smaller networks than well-established U.S. citizens. In addition to the importance of workplace community, this information can also guide your outreach and recruiting strategy. First, a smaller network suggests that standard outreach models may not reach a diverse or newly targeted population. Naturally, a question that should be asked by a recruiting team is, do different outreach pathways need to be utilized? Second, this tells us that different sources that have relationships with new Americans may need to be identified. The question that should be asked here is, what are the sources in my area? One of the biggest support systems for new Americans are community-based organizations, or CBOs. These organizations often support new Americans with employment training, education programming, and employment placement. These CBOs often are a trusted hub for information sharing. Here are a few things to consider when working with CBOs. First, outreach. Identify your local workforce centers and community colleges. But most importantly, use a search engine to identify new American serving organizations in your area. The query is simple. Enter the city of interest, followed by refugee and immigrant support organizations. This should provide you with a list of organizations to target your outreach toward. Second, here are a few benefits to connecting with new Americans serving CBOs. A. Many have job placement professionals on staff that will be amazing points of contact. If you offer your employment needs and position outlines, they will pre-screen candidates and will support you with hiring and, depending on the organization, can offer support with onboarding and even workplace integration for their clients. B. Many have existing newsletters, websites, and social media that reach the populations they serve. And third, go to them. Build relationships with these organizations and tap into their established networks as they have built highly valued community relationships. Deliver presentations to their organization. Attend job fairs that are targeting new Americans, and develop targeted outreach materials to reach new Americans. Some CBOs may be willing to advise on translation support. These organizations are a major resource and one of the best pathways to reaching new American communities. A next step in your recruiting plan is content. First, know that outreach materials may need to be translated, and there is a good chance that CBOs can support and advise with this step. Here's a tip. Ask if materials will need to be translated and in what languages. They should be able to advise you. Second, use images that depict the job opportunity rather than a word-heavy document. Pictures or videos empower new Americans to see the job before committing to the job. This is an example of the pre-screening that can come with excellent job descriptions and utilizing images. Third, the use of plain language is important because it makes for easier person-to-person or artificial intelligence translation. Below, there's an example of a word-heavy communication versus the use of pictures and plain language. So instead of, join our team of excited and dedicated performers to advance the work of our company with the potential to earn an education while you work and advance your career. Try this. Bullet points with direct, plain language paired with visual content. We are hiring. Full-time and part-time available. Opportunity to go to school while you work. Opportunities for professional advancement. Lastly, I wanted to provide common questions that CBO job developers and specialists may ask you as your relationship develops. This can be jarring for some recruiters and HR professionals. I hope this transparency will support relationship building and preparation. Be prepared to answer these questions and it will quickly advance your partnership. 1. What is the salary or wage? 2. What is the location? 3. Do you have opportunities to advance? 4. Do you have a model in place to ensure equitable access to upskilling? 5. Will you offer cross-training? 6. What benefits do you offer? 7. Are there options for free parking or work travel reimbursement? 8. What are the shift schedules for each job and is there flexibility? 9. Can you walk me through the interview and onboarding process? 10. Do you provide uniforms? 11. Do you have a plan for translation and interpretation if it is needed? 12. Do you have an existing diverse team? 13. Do you have affinity or employee resource groups to develop community? These are just a few of the questions a job placement professional may ask when establishing a relationship with an employer. Finally, we will close part 1 of the series with a recap of recommendations and best practices. From a DEI perspective, first, trust the process. The I-9 Employment Eligibility Verification form is your friend. Don't allow bias to unfairly influence decisions. And second, Review job descriptions to ensure they match the needs of the job. Third, content development. Use plain language and images. Fourth, prepare your organization with diversity and bias training, and be aware that different levels of your organization may require different training. And fifth, consider the current demographics of your employees. Do you need to consider establishing employee resource groups? And from a recruiting perspective, first, networks matter. New Americans may have smaller networks. Second, community-based organizations are highly valuable. Contact them. Third, tailor your outreach strategy to reach new Americans. And fourth, go to them. Deliver presentations at community-based organizations and attend hiring events targeting new Americans. If you have questions, please use this QR code and it will take you to a form where you can submit your questions. It will also connect you with the Office of New Americans to support you with next steps. And please check out the next episode of the Working with New Americans series as we discuss applications, interviewing, and onboarding. Thanks for your time.